Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. We often hear, well at least I do when I'm out and about, we often hear the term, we are powerful people. We have something, the power of the mind, whatever it is, and we're not using that power. We don't realize who we are and what we can achieve. And these are sort of often in conversations with somebody and they say these things. And I think to myself, well, what does that actually mean? If we were that powerful, surely we would have got rid of the tyranny. We would have got rid of the nasty stuff in the world and we'd all be very happy, wouldn't we? Well, in order to delve into this and find out a little bit more, I asked Dawn Lester if she would come back on the show. You may remember she came on the show a few months ago now with this rather remarkable book, and I recommend it thoroughly. What Really Makes You Ill? Why Everything You Thought You Knew About Disease is Wrong. And it is a big tome, but it's very well written and easy to read. Anyway, I digress on that because I want to know just how powerful me, you, all of us really are. Dawn joins us now. Hello, Dawn.
Hi, Richard. Thanks for inviting me back to have this conversation. It's a topic that you've been kind of covering in a number of your a number of the videos that you've put out recently of recognizing who we are and our power. So it's a good conversation. It'll be a good
Well, I'm very
conversation.
much looking forward to it because, as I said to you, and I say this sometimes to many of the people who come on the show, it's a bit of an adventure doing these interviews because I don't really know what's going to be said, and certain areas are beyond my knowledge, and so I'm learning all the time, which is what makes it a thrill. So, and this is what something people often say to me, they say, but if only people realize just how powerful they are, life would be better. So that's what I'm fascinated to learn more about.
Well, as I say, we do know somewhere at a deep level. I'm sure a lot of people are becoming more aware at more of the inner level. The insights that we are powerful. Only unfortunately through the way life is and the indoctrination system and the as I call them, the would-be controllers are not are reluctant to let us recognize that, and so we are disempowered. We are indoctrinated into certain ideas. We're given information that is not correct, and that's certainly been very obvious over the last like nearly 5 years, isn't it? That started, beginning of 2020, and again, you kindly sort of showed the book, which was published in December 2019, just before. So
I know
there.
what an irony that is. Because, I mean,
Mm,
because you chart all these different problems, medical issues, or diseases that may not be diseases, or whatever.
mm.
And of course, I was quite eager when I got the book to go and go, oh, what do you say about that thing in 2020 that everyone was dealing with? And then, of course, I realised, oh yes, it was published just before that.
Mm.
And I'm sure that you'd have a hell of a lot to say about that.
Well, the specific thing that happened or that we were told happened in 2020, um, wasn't anything. Um, there is enough information in that book, especially in chapter 3, to provide people with an understanding of why it wasn't what we were told it was, and give some suggestions of what it may have been. But there's another aspect to all of that, and it's been the fear propaganda. And I
Mm.
know, as I mentioned to you before we started, there were a couple of your videos recently. One's called "Don't Let Them Take Away Your Spirit," and the other one is "It's Happening Behind the Scenes." So showing people that just because there's an awful lot of doom and gloom and everything out there, that there's
Yes.
other things going on, which allows people to not get drawn into the doom and gloom. Unfortunately, many people are staying in that place, and that's deliberate because the would-be controllers want well, that's the idea. That seems to be the agenda. They want us to feel insignificant and disempowered, so that we don't actually do anything about
Yes, as if
things.
we don't have the power to do it.
Exactly, and that, well, we can't do this, and we can't do all sorts of different things because all these different systems are in the way. And to a great extent, I think that was part of the silver lining of the 2020 nonsense, because it's given a lot of people the opportunity to say, hang on a minute, this makes no sense, and to start doing something about it. And of course, that's where we are. In many, as like you were saying, that what's happening behind the scenes, and many people doing various things, only that's not necessarily put out in the public, so not everyone knows about it. But I think as we move forward, more people are interacting and connecting with each other, and building communities and collaborating, that it's happening. It doesn't have to be put out in the media, whether it's the mainstream. And I think a lot of your viewers know what to think about what gets put out by the mainstream media. Unfortunately, there's still an awful lot of fear-mongering in the alternative media as well, and certainly in within the alternative health community, and that can cause confusion, and many people can then defer back to the mainstream, because they're not recognizing what they can do and how they can think for themselves. And I believe there are many people who are following this system, or because they feel something's not quite right, but they don't really necessarily know what to do about it. And obviously, the more information we can share, that they can find out what they can do about it. But one of the reasons of talking about the power of the mind is not just to show, how we think. It's not just about how we think. It's then the actions that we take. So it's not purely a philosophical thing. It's actually what we can then do about it, and realizing if we don't think we can do something about it, we get into this "oh, I can't" type mentality, and these mindsets, to find out what's behind that. And it can quite often be just through indoctrination that we've been led to believe. But there's certainly scientific evidence behind how the mind works. And I say I've got a fairly short presentation, just a few pages, just to go through some of the information so people can get an idea. I mean, I would imagine most of your audience are probably fairly familiar with some of the concepts, just even talking about the placebo effect. And it's really, to help people get a clearer idea, and then hopefully share this information with other people who are not quite as clear on things, and just to be able to see how we're controlled, and then what we can do about how we can come out of that control and take our the power over our own ideas and thoughts back, because that's really what this is all about, to try and find out what we can do and put it into effect. And of course, so much of what's going on is about divide and conquer.
Yes. And it would seem to me, sorry to interrupt but it would seem to me that the fact that they have to try and dumb our intelligence down and break our spirit is to such an extent in all the different ways. I mean, for example, someone sent me a thing saying, oh, it looks like the WEF want to get rid of pets of those people on the lower echelons of society who are on benefits, and it'll be to save the planet. But of course, really, it's about taking away your companions and things like that, which of course no one should acquiesce to or give them joinder, etc. And I'll probably do a video on it anyway. But if they have to go to that extreme of dumbing us down and controlling us that way, it must mean that they are frightened that if we really knew our potential, we would wipe the floor with them.
Yes, and that is the direction we're going, to to recognize our power, and individually and also in collaboration. And that's of course why the divide and conquer is just coming out in so strongly in so many different areas of our lives. And my aim is to help people not be drawn into these divide and conquer. Yeah, we can have different opinions, and at the same time we can have conversations and say, oh, okay, you see it differently, and sharing our.
Oh, the internet is just it's just frozen at that point. Hopefully we will get Dawn back. Here we go. I've got Dawn back now. Sorry about that, Dawn. Little internet glitch there. But so anyway, divide and conquer, that just goes to show, the power of the internet. You never quite know whether they're listening to us as you record these sort of things and just want to sort of be a hassle. Now, I know you said just now you have a little presentation that you want to put to us. So I'm going to hope that we can get through that without any more glitches. So I think well, there we go. The power of the mind.
Yes. Right. So
I'm just going to make a slight adjustment because I can't quite see all of that. Hold on, bear with me. That's my fault for not setting it up 100%. There we go.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that people are probably familiar with is called the placebo. It's again, this is according to the National Centre for Complementary and Integrative Health. It's a fairly mainstream organisation. So it says the gold standard for testing interventions in people is the randomized placebo-controlled clinical trial, in which volunteers are randomly assigned to a test group receiving the experimental intervention or a control group receiving a placebo. Comparing results from the two groups suggests whether changes in the test group result from the treatment or occur by chance. Now, interesting that they say by chance, because that's diminishing the actual power of the placebo effect. And again, I think even calling it the placebo effect is still minimizing the true nature of this, which is, as it called it, the power of the mind, our own ability to influence our experiences, which is really what this is about. So as I say, calling it the placebo effect, but it's they call them the placebo pills because they're really effectively it's a sugar pill. It's an inert substance. Whatever it is, it's something that is not supposed to have any kind of pharmacological effect. It's not supposed to have a physiological effect. And yet, it's well known that many people who are in that control group, who are taking a placebo, experience a beneficial health outcome. And as I say, it's resulting from a person's anticipation that an intervention will help. So again, it's a little bit stronger than their anticipation. Now, it's not everybody who has the beneficial health outcome from taking a placebo. So that shows that we are different. Part of the, I'm going to be careful here, part of the system, the medical system, is to make us think that we're all the same and we're just automatons and our bodies are just machines that can be fixed from some kind of intervention of some description.
Yes, like just like a robot where we're all identical and you change this nut and that nut and everything, or like a car where the same model of car, you change the carburetor and it will be the same effect on each one.
Absolutely. And that's not the case for the human body. The human body is an interconnected organism what happens in one part is not isolated from the rest of the body. And again, it's the body and the mind. So this is bringing the mind part into the, the mind-body connection, because the mind is not separate from the body. But certainly the human body is not like a machine, like you say, not like a car. We can just, take out and replace the plug, and then everything's back to working properly, because there are so many different aspects to the body, and so many different influences that we're exposed to, which is something that we do go into some detail in the book, of the kinds of things that can adversely affect our health. When people say, well, if it wasn't this one thing, what was it? The answer is, and most people aren't going to be happy with this, is I don't really know. I can provide you with a whole load of possibilities, and but I can't tell you exactly. And again, that's where the power of the mind, why different people are respond differently to different treatments, to different things that they are told by certain people in white coats.
Yes.
And again, which we will come on to.
So let me
Yeah,
just
sure.
ask about the placebo, if I may,
Yeah,
because
sure.
I mean, it always strikes me that if you're taking something which you are told is the drug, but it actually isn't, and you have a beneficial reaction to it, something, and it's obviously not the sugar pill, then something's working, and surely that tells the industry, wait a minute, if there is a significant number of people in all the millions of tests that they do who are actually getting better by taking something which is purely they think it's the pill and it isn't, there has to be something in the mind. So why are we bothering to manufacture pills when we could explore more the fact that just by people believing in something, it's actually making a difference?
Absolutely. And of course, that's why they don't want us to know, because they want to keep going with their industry.
Yes.
And that's why I put that definition at the beginning, where they were saying it was just by chance,
Right,
because
by
they want to
chance.
diminish the effectiveness
Yes.
of this. And yes, as I say, the industry is very aware of the placebo effect, and they don't want us to be, which is why it's an important aspect of understanding the power of the mind. I mean, so as I say, the placebo effect is pretty well known by different people. There is the opposite, which is as you can see. Can you see this page?
Yes.
The nocebo effect.
Nocebo effect.
Yes, which is the opposite, and that's in quotes, and because it's from a medical doctor. Her name's Lisa Rankin. I'll show you her book shortly, but she says the same mind-body power that can heal you can also harm you. So this is the other aspect, and this is where I think it's important for people to understand the power of the mind, because it can be used, and it is in many ways being used to harm us, but because we are taking on certain beliefs and certain fears and certain ideas that are and following certain things to do,
So
that can have
would
a harmful effect. Yes.
would a an example of that be, say, nicotine? That if you're told that, I mean, take the smoking bit out of it, but if you're told, well, nicotine's addictive and it's not good for you, but actually we do know that nicotine is good for you and we have nicotine receptors in our body. But if by saying, no, nicotine's bad for you, the body will go, okay, this substance is bad for me.
It could well do, and again, that may be different for different people. Some people may say, "Oh, it's bad for me. I mustn't." And at the same time, some people, because it's bad for me, and still carry on doing it. And of course, then that's that contradiction. Well, not contradiction, but that's that conflict in the body, and the body is going to respond to that conflict of being told that something that you're putting into your body, or you're using or inhaling, whatever it is actually harmful, and so your body is going to respond. At the same time, in there are substances that are put into tobacco production, the industrial tobacco production, that I think are somewhat more harmful, that can actually,
Yes.
but that's a slightly different issue. But again, it's, yeah, all these different things we're told are good for us that aren't good for us, and that aren't good for us that actually are good for us. And again, it's the confusion, and more, many people are more susceptible to uh, the power of uh, the message, really. And some people aren't, and that's why, you can have two people who are exposed, eat the same things, exposed to the same substances in the environment, and yet have different health outcomes, because they may have different mindsets, different ideas, different thoughts, different ways of being, just different approaches.
Yes.
One can live in fear, and that definitely is one of the ways that our body can respond, because which I will come to. So yes, it can really be, the power of the advertising, which, if you've looked into Edward Bernays, the father of PR, public relations. I mean, his book Propaganda, I mean, it's almost 100 years old now. I think it's 1928, where he talks about, the conscious manipulation of the masses. So, they've been working on this for a while now. I mean, it's not that he started it, but they knew about that, and again, it's being ramped up, which is why it's time to, say.
So, I mean, in a way, this is a bit like hypnosis, really, suggestion.
Yes, yes, I suppose a kind of hypnosis, which again, at the beginning of 2020, it was on a daily basis. It was coming out all the time, the same message, constant, constant, constant. And people who were watching their televisions were getting the same message. So again, a kind of hypnosis. Yeah, you're right. You're right. So if we go into the next one, so that's the book that I was that I referred to.
Mind over medicine.
Yes. Now, um, yes, I mean, as I say, that's a book, but the subtitle is Scientific Proof That You Can Heal Yourself. Now, I think she had some issues when she first put out that information, but again, yeah, they don't want us to know. But this particular quote came from an article that she wrote called The Nocebo Effect: Negative Thoughts Can Harm Your Health. It's on Psychology Today website. I haven't got a link there, but and this I think is interesting. Those treated, so again, the quote is, those treated with nothing more than placebos often report fatigue, vomiting, muscle weakness, colds, ringing in the ears, taste disturbances, memory disturbances, and other symptoms that shouldn't result from a sugar pill. Now, I think that quote's pretty astounding, especially if you take a couple of things like the ringing in the ears and taste disturbances, of things that were people were reporting over the last few years, or have been reporting over the last few years, that this is happening from something that is, those symptoms can result from something that's just a sugar pill. And I would suggest that those kind of those symptoms, variety of different symptoms, can also be the result of reading newspaper reports and watching television programs and listening to people who are saying the same thing, that is what can happen because of a certain thing that, that people might get, that was going around. So
Right.
this is, I don't have any details. I I can't prove it, except that the nocebo effect is known. But I would suggest that a number of people were experiencing certain symptoms because they were told they are the symptoms of what is going around, or what was going around. So this is,
Interesting stuff.
yes, and it's even to the extent that there was a trial I mean, there have been various different trials, and one particular one of a chemotherapy drug that people who were taking the placebo, who were in the control group, so they were taking the placebo, still because they knew they were in a chemotherapy drug trial, nevertheless manifested some of the symptoms that we know are associated with chemotherapy, such as hair loss or vomiting. And so again, that's where the vomiting even within here. But they were in the control group, so they weren't receiving the active ingredient that was in the chemotherapy drug, but they were still manifesting the actual symptoms, the effects that they were again expecting. So this is where it's really, as you say, interesting and useful to know just the power of the mind, that we can manifest things in our own bodies.
Yes.
So, in terms of stress, I mean, it's one of the things we talk about in the book, and there are, uh, as I put there are physical, chemical or electromagnetic stressors, which are the things that cause stress, and there are also emotional stresses. So those are not anything that affect our body, but emotional stresses can actually have a physical effect within our body, which I think is probably not too surprising for some people. But it's not surprising the amount of emotional stress over the last 5 years of all the different things that have been going on. And that's creating symptoms of various kinds in our bodies because of the stress that we're under. So in terms of stress, I'm not saying it's inherently bad. So, if you're taking exercise, your body is under stress in some way. But something like running, the effect is temporary, and therefore when you stop running, your body's not under stress. It returns to homeostasis, you recover, and and you're fine. So it's not to say, oh, stress is bad. However, there is a point at which, when it's intense and prolonged, people can get to that stage where it is too much and people can be overwhelmed. And I think that was also the case over the last few years with this constant bombardment of disinformation, misinformation, all this stuff that's been coming through the media to make us feel stressed, to be in fear.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I often feel that it's not just the mainstream media that are doing it, but actually we're doing it to ourselves in a way, especially those people who are sort of woken up to what's going on, because they're constantly looking at more videos, or they're in Telegram groups and people are sharing stuff all the time of the terrors and the fear and this, that, and the other, or they're looking for answers and not really finding anything that actually helps. And so it seems like there's a constant bombardment from our side, albeit innocently, to sort of go, oh, look what they're doing now. Look what's going on over there. And oh my God, how about this? And no, that doesn't work. And we'll have to think again. And that, in many ways, I think that's just as bad.
I agree, and I think, as you say, talking about outside, I mean, I think in some ways there's sort of three aspects to this, because there's the mainstream propaganda where they're putting out stuff to make us scared. Then there's what may be called the alternative media, that is really putting out alternative doom and gloom. It's still doom and gloom, but of a different kind, and that's still pushing. And then there are those who are working on solutions, and if people are trying different things and say, oh well, that didn't work, but at least they're trying. So it's there are different aspects to this, and of course, if we're trying to create solutions and say, oh well, let's try this, see if it works, and to have support from other people, to collaborate instead of saying, oh, I'm doing this, oh well, I'm doing that, so we can't talk to each other, which is again ridiculous, and that's part of, as I was saying before, all the divide and conquer to make us feel that, oh well, there's only, and that's the other thing, that there's only one solution, when that's not necessarily the case. I mean, why
No.
not look at a few different ideas? Because in many ways we're different place from where we've been before, and so
Absolutely.
we're looking to create something very different from what we've had before, because so many of us are recognizing, no, it's time to stop this. It's gone on long enough.
Yeah.
So of course, we're looking to say, well, what can we do? And that's where this comes in. This is so important to recognize that, we do have the power to take back responsibility and think for ourselves, and not necessarily to have to do it all on our own, to collaborate, which is why I feel the divide and conquer is so detrimental for us, because that again is the opposite of what we want to do. And
Yeah.
we know they're trying to divide us on so many different issues, on all sorts of ideas of I'm not just don't know where to start with that particular one, but I mean,
No.
Just the whole idea of genders is just, I mean, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's so many of them. So many. So many.
Well, yes, and again, in one of your recent, I think it was, yes, one of your recent videos where you were talking about what's being put out within the education system
Hmm.
for children, and how they are being encouraged to think about subjects that are really totally inappropriate for them to be thinking at that age, and it's inappropriate for the school to decide when it's when they are ready. That should be something that happens in the home. And so again, it could be something people are saying, oh, oh, this is scary, and getting upset and angry about. Um, Whereas it could be another one of those situations where you say, well, hang on a minute, that's another thing. It's like, no, that's too much. We need to do something else. And I did see a couple of comments where people were saying, yep, definitely time to homeschool and do those kinds of, to take education into a different way, into a different aspect, into a different realm. And
Well,
let's,
it's. I mean, it's very strange, really, in my mind, that it ever went to a stranger to educate 30 kids in one class in any one time, when everybody has different circumstances and different things. We know that from GPs trying to sort of peddle the same white pills for people who have different reactions to those white pills. And now we're seeing a situation in our schools where you have all sorts of different nationalities coming together in one classroom, and one stranger amongst them all is telling them how they should think and what they should think about. And it's been removed from the power of the mothers and fathers of their own children it's strayed away from reading, writing and arithmetic to the sexuality of your children, which should have nothing to do with it. And any parent who is in their right mind should realise this is not correct, and should immediately withdraw their children and say, look, this is not the role of a school. Thank you very much. I'll do it myself.
yes, I totally agree with you.
Strident idea there, but there you go. Anyway,
It
sorry, we
is.
got digressed.
No. I mean, that's not a digression. I mean, that's important. That's an important part of it. And as you say, with 30 children in the one room at the same time, these are children all of a similar age, and yet that's not how we learn. Because again, well, even though they're similar age, they will have different ideas, different backgrounds, different ways of being, and they're being made to be little automatons, as you say. And also, they're not learning to interact with others younger and older. And in many of the schools, or again, in the old the old ways, there would be a group of local children, in the village school or whatever. There'd be different ages,
Yes.
and
And they're not
so
allowed to question that. I mean, that's the other
oh
thing. Is
oh
it's like, well, no. If you decide that you actually still believe there's only two genders, for example, you're not allowed to say, well, actually, I think that no, sorry, little Johnny, you're wrong. This is how you're learning. And
yes.
anyway.
And they're also taught that, if their parents think along a certain way, then their parents are conspiracy theorists. So, that pits a child having to choose between school and parents. I mean, that's just, again, it's another
Again,
divide.
divide and conquer.
Exactly. And controlling the children.
Yeah.
making them.
So that gives us the stress, which, as you say, prolonged use is not good for us.
And yeah, so that's what they put into effect from 2020 onwards. So and just they used fear. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Gabor Mate. He's been talking about his book, his more recent book, but this was one, When the Body Says No. He says the stress response is non-specific. It may be triggered in reaction to any attack, and this is the important part, or in response to any perception of attack or threat. So this is where the fear works. It doesn't mean that whatever is being told to us or being put out in the media is actually real. People can respond just because they perceive it to be an attack, or a
Yes.
threat. You know when you're out in the wild and there's a wild animal coming at you, that's your body will go into fight or flight, or those reactions. At the same time, it can go into those same reactions without it being a real. It doesn't have to be a real threat or a real attack, just the perception. And that, again, that's the emotional stressor, and that's why they've used the fear,
Yes,
the
I
idea
suppose.
that, yeah, go on.
I was just simply going to say, I mean, the mainstream media and indeed the alternative media, who seem to be trying to do a good thing, are doing all the roaring of the lion, but not actually, the lion doesn't turn up most of the time. And so we're frightened because, oh God, I can hear the lion. I can hear the lion. He must be circling around, but he's not actually there. It's just a tape recorder with a loudspeaker attached, and people are getting stressed as a result and in fear because they hear or are reading or believing the mainstream rubbish and thinking, oh my God, they're going to do this, they're going to do, and if I don't obey, and if I don't stay in line, if I don't acquiesce, they're going to do this. When actually, if you think about it, there's more of us than them. And if people just said, well, sorry, mate, no, what are you going to do? Put us all in prison? People are putting themselves in prison.
Yes, and that's the point of what I'm sharing here is to help people come out of that prison, and even as you say with the roaring of the lion, it's not, it doesn't even have to be the roaring. I mean, with the be careful here with the 2020 stuff. We were being told that it was some invisible thing.
Yes.
There wasn't even a tape recording of a lion roaring in that particular instance.
No.
It was all
The
made
suggestion
up.
of it.
Definitely, yes, and that's why the importance of sharing the information that those invisible enemies are not what we should be concerned about, is so important. I mean, there are many people who are saying, oh, it's not important to know that particular piece of information, that these things don't make us ill because it's not, well, it's not relevant. Well, it's very relevant for many reasons. It's not just in this one field of the names of different health problems. Because it goes out into many other places, and it's not just the invisible ones. It's all the that have never been proven to exist. It's the others as well. I mean, there are bacteria, fungi, and parasites that are also blamed for being the causes of all kinds of conditions. And again,
well, raw milk is an example of that, isn't it? That we're told, oh God, you can't have raw milk because it's going to be bad for you because it's got bacteria in it. And you go, well, hold on a second. That bacteria isn't necessarily mean and nasty and horrible. We've got bacteria in us. Actually, it might be beneficial. But they don't want you to know that.
Exactly. And so they basically kill whatever is in these, like in raw milk, the pasteurization process kills anything, so it becomes a lifeless product.
Yes.
Whereas, our body responds to living foods. That's not these chemical things. Again, it's, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, so yeah, it is. I mean, so many people have said, a lot of what we're told is an inversion of the truth. So we're really getting through layers of what we're learning is not true, so that we can start to find what is true. And of course,
Yeah.
that's all part of the journey that we're all on at the moment, is looking for what is true. And it's not stopping, because these things are different layers. So sometimes we stop at the first layer, oh, get rid of that layer, and think, oh, that's it. And then it's not
It's an onion,
recognizing
isn't it?
it is an onion, and that there are layers. And it's not to scare people. It's not like,
No.
oh, like you were saying about the different rabbit holes and different pieces of information. We don't have to know everything. I mean, it's impossible to know everything about everything, but we're working through what we can learn and what we do have access to, what we can know, and what we can do something about. Because that's, again, what it is about. There are things we're told are out of our control, and a lot more of it is, in fact, within our own control. So if we move on to, again, thinking of the power of the mind, quite often when you say people at the power of the mind, we think of the brain, and we think that it's our thoughts are in our brain. As the medical establishment say, sorry, I apologize. The brain is a complex organ that controls thought, memory, emotion, touch, motor skills, vision, breathing, temperature, hunger, and every process that regulates our body. So I put the question, but is this true? And I've got a big question mark over that, because I'm not sure that it is true. And certainly when it comes to thought and memory and some of these other processes. And the reason is that I've found a number of articles where people have actually had parts of their brain missing, or, in some cases, a substantial amount of their brain actually missing. So, as you can see from some of those titles, I mean, they're just the titles of some of the articles I've found.
Look at that. Man born with virtually no brain has advanced maths degree.
Yep.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, so that must be an American. I just realized that must be an American.
No math.
Yes, math.
Degree.
Yeah, yes.
It's
That's
mathematics.
yes. Oh, I know. I have those discussions with many American. In fact, some of them didn't realize that, in fact, it comes from, it's an abbreviation of mathematics, which, as you say, has got the S. So that's obviously an American article, but the one before is the maths
Yes,
genius.
maths genius.
Yes, who was a guy who was I mean, maths genius. He was discovered to have an IQ of about 126, and some of these situations, having their brain missing, was discovered by some other reason that they had some kind of test that discovered this. And I mean, they were living fairly, should we say, normal lives, or even
Well,
lives.
just to put a personal story on this very briefly, my son had a brain hemorrhage at 18. He's now 30. And 18, he had a brain hemorrhage and he nearly died. And the brain hemorrhage destroyed a section of his brain. It came up in the things. It was a terrible period, and he had to have brain surgery. And so the surgeon then had to go in a year later, and he went through the damaged part of the brain, saying, look, in order to sort out the bit that's leaked, we have to go in, and it'll damage it a bit more. But we will go through the route the blood damaged the brain. Anyway, they did this, cleared out the issue. And afterwards, my son, who they said, oh, he may have a lisp, he may not be able to speak properly, he may have had a stroke and not be able to use one side of his body, a whole load of miserable things they said that might happen. I thought, great, thanks for that. He was brighter, more cheerful, more energy than he had been in the previous 18 years. And the damage done to the brain actually made no difference to him. He could remember things, and he was a much jollier chap. So I'm well on for that.
That's incredible. I hadn't heard that before. So yes, I mean that is amazing. And again, that's their view of what the brain is. And they call it the hard problem of oh no, my brain. Yes, I think they call it the hard problem of consciousness, because they're looking for consciousness within the brain, and it just
Yes.
isn't there.
No.
And that's all part of it, that who and what we are is beyond what we think of as our physical body. It's not, the consciousness is not located in our brain, and
No.
this is one of the reasons why I share this information, because it shows that it's not about the brain, and it's not what they say. And again, you've had the experience of these medical people having an idea about something that's going to be, and it doesn't happen. Now that also ties in with the nocebo effect, because many people who have believed the consultant to, when they've had a prognosis of a particular condition, they've believed that, and they have followed the prognosis to the day quite often, or certainly within a
Yeah.
very short time. And there are others who take a completely different attitude, which we'll come on to shortly, um,
Right.
who who don't succumb to that. So again, this is, like I say, why, as I say, the power of the mind. What is interesting in a number of these cases, and it doesn't seem to have been the case with the Osam, is that they found these people had what is called hydrocephalus, which is water on the brain. And what they call water, but it's the cerebrospinal fluid, which is substantially water. I think it's um, in the high 90s percent water. And if anyone's familiar with the work of certainly Masaru Emoto, and more recently Veda Austin, with
Mm.
what they're working on in terms of what water actually is, and water is by no means just H2O. I mean, that's again a very diminished view of what this substance is, and water, and just how much information um, can be contained within water. So again, I don't know. I'm not coming to any conclusions. I just think it's extremely interesting that these people had, you know, as a substantial amount of water in the area where one would normally have expected their brain to be, and yet they were living, pretty much normal, if not, you know, exceptional lives. So just,
Amazing.
again, this shows how amazing we are, and how little, well, how much there is still to learn, shall we say,
Yes.
rather than
Yes.
not so much how little we know, how much we are learning.
Yes.
And as I was moving on to I'm going to be careful again with this. There's a spontaneous remission, and annotated bibliography was prepared by the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which they call it the largest database of medically reported cases of spontaneous remission in the world. And they, again, I'm going to paraphrase, but people can read the screen, how they define spontaneous remission as people who've had either limited or no what's called treatment to the standard treatment. They haven't received any, or received little, and yet their symptoms or their condition disappeared.
Yes.
And what is interesting is that in that document there are 8 characteristics, which they put under the heading some of the characteristics associated with remission and survival that people are reporting. And this and the next slide show 2 of them, and I think this is where I feel it's empowering. I mean, because that's really the essence of my message, is for people to feel empowered rather than disempowered. And so this is the first characteristic that I think is useful for people to hear, and it's a change from dependency to autonomy. So it's not just the mindset, and because it's combined with activities, attitudes, and behaviors that promote increased autonomy, awareness of themselves, others, and their environment, love, joy, playfulness, satisfaction, laughter, and humor.
And I've had a number of people on the show actually, and people who've sent me books about that disease that is a sign of the zodiac just before the Leo sign. And they have survived what the doctors have often said, oh, well, this is a life-threatening thing. And they've thrived because they've actually turned away from the offer of going to a prescribed set of treatments, and they've decided, as you so rightly say there, they've used their own autonomy. They've decided, I'm going to have a good life and do things. And actually the problem that they actually were diagnosed with has disappeared.
Yes, and I mean, I can't remember if I mentioned it in our previous conversation. I also had a similar diagnosis back in the 90s. At the time, I did go through the standard procedures, yes. So I'm here to say that's not automatically, a death sentence either, even though we can, well, that's maybe the more difficult route. At the same time, it's not inevitable, because that's, almost 30 years ago now. So,
Oh, right.
and
I guess, I mean, a lot would depend on your attitude to it, I suppose.
definitely, and I knew at the time it was something to do with my mindset. I don't know where I had where that came from. I still don't to this day. Some kind of intuition told me it was something to do with my mindset, and at the same time to make changes in my life. And that's the point with this. It's not just a change of mindset, it's what you then put into action.
Yes.
So it's always this mixture of how you approach something, your ideas and your behaviors, your ideas and attitudes, and then the behaviors and the actions that follow it. And the second one is pretty similar. So the other characteristics are people who take control of their lives. And again, it says personal, professional, emotional, spiritual, and medical. So again, it's in all aspects of your life. And then living each day fully combined with a willingness to evaluate their beliefs and attitudes and change old beliefs and attitudes that are no longer appropriate or adequate. So this is the other thing, is to not hang on to things that are no longer serving you, and to learn to let go of those things that are no longer serving you. So again, this is tied into where we are now with moving away from these old systems, and we don't have to stay in them, and we can take useful information from them and then create something new.
Yes.
So but it does require the willingness to both evaluate beliefs and attitudes and to change them where they're no longer appropriate. And again, it's one of the other practices, shall we say, is something, again, we were talking about before you press record, that it does require us to understand how to stop this busyness of the mind, because we're always pulled in so many different directions, and to take time to sit, be in the present. And I know there's a lot of talk about, being in the present and not allowing ourselves to be pulled back into the past or being fearful of the future, and just take some time when you can to just be in the now, be in present, and be just sit with that and recognize the power of that, and to let whatever the thoughts are just sort of like clouds, drift in and drift back out again.
And this is what children do. Their children are in the present all the time.
Totally.
Young children.
Yeah.
And animals. I mean, you look
Yes.
at, I've got a cat, and a cat is in the present. It's not thinking, oh, yesterday I nearly got that rat. That's a real bugger. I wish I'd got that rat. Or it's not thinking, oh, well, he's going out now, so I wonder if he'll be back for dinner. I wonder what I'll have. Should I stay in a little bit longer? They're not worried about that. They're just concerned with the now. Obviously, you can't go through life just in that, because you need to make plans and evaluate things you've learned, of course. But we do tend to spend too much time either regretting something or fearing something that might happen.
Yes, And that's one of the habits maybe that we can start reevaluating and looking to see how we can change it so that we can not carry the baggage of the fears of what happened last time I did this, and say, well, okay,
Yes.
that was, to learn from that and take it forward and say, okay, well, what, and again, learning that whatever our experiences are, or learning from our experiences, because that's what they are. They're opportunities to learn something and to grow and expand.
Mm.
Um,
No, absolutely.
so, as I've said, awareness is key, and that's one of the things, to become aware. It's not to get paranoid or, get too into it, because, you can kind of, oh, I've got to think everything, be aware of all my thoughts. No, it's just becoming more aware, and also recognizing that our language is a manifestation of our thoughts and our beliefs. And so you can see where your beliefs may be holding you back by some of the words that you're using. So, people saying, oh, well, I can't do that. Okay, well, why don't you think you can do that? What is that can't based on? I mean, they're the standard things, or
Mm.
I have to do that. These are some of the, very standard ones, but it actually expands into a lot of our communications with other people, how, as I said, communicating with other people and being clear in our language and being more expansive in how we use our language. I don't mean expanding our vocabulary, I just mean to be more open to being creative and not restrictive, the fear of what's gone before, that
Yes.
oh,
Yes.
will that happen, or will that happen, the worry, or, the fear of what
Well,
might
I mean,
happen.
again, if you take the example of a child learning to walk, a child will fall over many times in learning to walk, but that doesn't go, oh, every time I get up, I fall over. He just goes, I'm going to walk. I'm going to learn this thing. And it may be that he's seen other people walk and he realizes it's a possibility, or it's an innate feeling that I've got legs, so therefore I ought to do this. And they walk. And there's no sort of, oh, well, I'm never going to do this. Might be by the time they get to the age to ride a bicycle, and suddenly that, oh no, I don't think I can do this. But you don't get them doing that when they're 18 months or 8 months, whatever it is, I can't remember now, when they start to learn to, they just go, oh, I am going to walk.
Yes, that's a brilliant example. I've heard that before. It is, and if you use that as a, well, if children, if young babies, children, wherever they decide to get up, if they fall down the first time, just go, well, that's it, I can't do it. That's it.
Well, think what would have happened to the race.
Nobody would be walking. Yeah, exactly. And go, well,
We
we're
would not
walking.
have survived. The animals would have come over and picked us up one by one.
Definitely. So again, it's to, like I say, to be aware,
Mm.
and again, because that comes in with, the beliefs and the attitudes, and being aware of how we're using our language, because our language is powerful. Um, as you can see from this book, a friend of mine, Danny Katz, who wrote this. I mean, it's, as she says, reality configures to reflect the language that is continuously programming our collective field. I mean, we're restricting ourselves or expanding ourselves depending on the words that we're using. And again, in terms of, like she said, upgrading the culture and changing our reality, it's it's not always to think that there's something wrong with reality that we need to change it. I know there's that saying by Mahatma Gandhi, be the change you want to see in the world. I'm using sort of artistic license and slightly amending that to suggest, that people be the way they want to see the world, because it does actually start with each of us. What
Mm.
we experience starts from us, and again, that's why, the power of the mind. It's not about what's happening out there. We have to understand who we are, what we're doing, how we think, and that those thoughts and those ideas are then reflected to us in our experiences. And so if we want the world to be peaceful, it starts with us to being peaceful,
Yes.
because going out and protesting against was doesn't work. Because we know that. I mean, just look at the number of people who were in the streets in 2003, and yet they carried on with that particular war, took no notice. So that we know that doesn't work. I mean, that's just one example, but we know that doesn't work, and
Yeah.
it is about creating rather than protesting. And there's another quote which is, "Love peace, don't hate war." So it is that, and it might sound very woo-woo to some people. I mean, it really isn't, and that's the point of explaining the power of the mind, because it does start with that. It really does. So this is just the last. It's a quote, as I say, this one's attributed to Viktor Frankl, although there are some people who say that they couldn't find it in any of his work, within any of his work. And in fact, there's that's actually over the corner. So between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And I think that's where we can start to reclaim our power, if you like, because the stimulus is the constant bombardment within the media. I mean, wherever it is, of the doom and gloom and the fear mongering and all this, just trying to get us to, as I say, divide or just have different thoughts or whatever it is. But between that stimulus and the way we respond, there is that space, and that's where how we respond. That's where we have the power, is to how we
Yes,
respond.
how we respond,
Yes.
absolutely.
So if somebody says something horrible, we can get angry. So we can fire back out very quickly at them,
Yeah.
and then maybe regret it later. But if you take that moment, and I'm not saying, people should accept that somebody's horrible to you, I don't mean that at all, but it's a question of what we choose to do with our response. So
Yes.
it's
Yes.
not to say, oh, that's okay, turn the other cheek, you can hit me on that side. It's not to, they're the two extremes, but to find something within the middle that says, that's inappropriate or whatever it is, but to come from our
Well,
own
exactly.
power.
I mean, people might say, well, someone could say something horrible to you, and you may say, well, that's your opinion. Fair enough. It doesn't worry me. It's your opinion. Nothing to do with me. Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Precisely. And
You are the weakest link. Goodbye.
yes, and that's yes, and that again is the response where we grow and where we have the freedom. And that's exactly, I mean, that's a brilliant example of you taking your freedom to respond, and to take to accept, to recognize, and to acknowledge your own power of what you can do, of what you do within that situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's basically it. And as I put there at the bottom, that's my the name
Dawn's
of my,
writings on Substack.
yes,
So yeah, people can.
yes. So
Brilliant.
I'll stop share there.
Fantastic. Well, Dawn, that's been fascinating, and I'm sure people will have got a lot out of that. And we live in a world of fear at the moment, and it's everywhere, and it's being advanced. And even though we think that we are fighting it tooth and nail, people who are watching the show are thinking, okay, I need to know what's going on, and they'll come to videos like this and others that other people make, but they may not realise quite that actually it can be affecting them, and it's down to them to go, okay, I take that on board. I understand that they're out there to get us in one way or another, but I'm not going to let them. I'm not going to let it, unless the bomb drops on my head, I'm not going to worry about it, because up until the moment it hits me on the head, and it might not even go off, it might just bounce onto the floor. Let's face it, might be a dud. So in the meantime, I'm going to laugh and have a good life. I'm not going to wither away before it's actually hit me on the head, because it may not come.
That's it. I mean, I often say, when people say about all the agenda, the plans, I say, well, just because people have plans, it doesn't mean they're going to happen. Now, that's not to say, oh, well, we do nothing.
No.
It's so again, the awareness, and then what we choose to do. So again, the stimulus and response, that gap. You say, okay, well, that's that. Do I buy into the fear and become and just fall apart? Or do I say, okay, well, I recognize that. What can I do about it?
Yes.
And to always then choose what we can do about something, if we can do something about it, and to take action. And yeah, not necessarily by ourselves, to connect with other people, which is why, again, the collaboration with other people is important, and choosing to
Especially
work
if you can find
together.
upbeat people who are, positive and have, because that will rub off on you rather than collaborating with people who are going, no, it's all over, there's nothing we can do. You don't want to pick those people
Well,
if
the
you can
chance,
help it.
absolutely, because the chances are they are not going to be contemplating solutions
No.
and having ideas, because and that actually is such a good point as well, that we can be influenced by other people, and it's much
Yes.
harder to or maybe I'm setting that out again, with the language I'm using, but I would imagine it's harder to keep that energy at bay all the time when there's something really negative,
Well,
rather than
it's hard to keep the flame going if somebody else is trying to blow it out all the time.
yes, it's harder work, and it's not to give up on people. It's to recognize that, well, where do I want to put my energy? Where can I be effective? What can I actually do? And
Yeah.
recognizing, there is a lot that we can do, and not to be drawn into the, oh, well, I can't do. I mean, there are some things maybe we can't do something about, and just recognize that. And again, looking at all the different, rabbit holes that we could dive down in terms of
Well, we
what,
can only fight one at a time. That's the way I look at it. You can't do
well,
them all, and you may have strengths for certain ones and not others, and there'll be others who can do those. So, you haven't got to firefight everything, if
no,
at
and
all.
and and also, when you're saying fighting things, I think maybe we need to be aware of not fighting, but creating a different solution, like the Buckminster
Yes.
Fuller. I love that Buckminster Fuller quote. You know, don't fight the existing system, create a new
Create a
one that
new one.
makes the old one obsolete. I mean, that's slightly paraphrased, but it's the
Well,
essence of,
exactly.
and that's where we are, and that's where we are.
Yes,
That's
and
what
I
we're
think
doing.
we are at that pinnacle. I'm going to have to draw it to a close now because I don't want to
Sure,
be over the hour on the video
no,
for
it's
too much.
fine.
But just to remind people, your other great works is What Really Makes You Ill. Everything you thought you knew about disease is wrong, and you touch on some of these issues that we've been mentioning, of course. And so those things that we had to step a little bit gingerly around in this, you don't. You don't pull any punches. You put it as it is and as it should be in your book, which is fantastic. And thank you for that. And so thank you for the stimulating conversation about the power of the mind, because we often hear that term that, we can, we're very powerful. And actually, some people think, that means that we can zap things with our fingers, and, a power that is perhaps, well, maybe we can, who knows. But we've definitely got that power to choose how we respond. And our body, if it's favourable, will respond favourably to us. We don't want to put ourselves any iller than they are trying to make us.
Absolutely.
Dawn, thank you so much for joining me today, and to you, the lovely viewer, for joining me and listening in. I will be back with more monologues and more wonderful guests, but in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. And Dawn, thank you for taking us through that.
Thank you for inviting me, Richard.
Until next time, from us both, goodbye.